In today's episode, I speak with my friend Mark Sims. He's the CEO and founder of Fikes. They're a service-based company that does B2B commercial cleaning, and his business is super impressive, does high eight figures. But what's more impressive is how he went after this model of a boring business to build an amazing company that allowed him to launch his own private equity fund that has done over 10 acquisitions. This episode's a winding road filled with really cool stories and tactics that can help you. We talk about his investment thesis for his private equity fund, why he opts for businesses that align with his superpower. He looks at, do they have recurring revenue or not, and other things that will make or break if they're going to buy into a deal. He also talks about his superpower of sales and how to be really strong at it and common mistakes most people are making. We then go down the path of, he played college football at a D1 program. He's an outside linebacker. This is a big dude. Used to have a mullet. He talks about the one skill set he got from football that's made him amazing as a business owner that I think you'll like. We get into the origin story of Fikes. He started out of a storage unit and has grown into a massive company with over 4 different locations and serves 5,000 clients. So this episode is packed. If you're looking to do something a little non-traditional, I would definitely check this one out. Or if you're someone that's, looking to buy a company, hear how he has done it the right way. But this is a really fun one. I hope you enjoyed today's episode with Mark Sims.
You cannot invent and pioneer if you cannot accept failure.
We wanted people that were insanely great at what they did.
Nobody was making any money at all. Most people thought the internet was going to be a fad.
All right, today on the podcast, I have someone, Mark Sims, I've been wanting to get on for a while. I joined this entrepreneurship group and there was a retreat in San Diego. I was by a fire talking to people, and all of a sudden this huge dude walked over and dropped this wisdom on me and my friend and then floated away. I was like, who was that guy? Like, oh, that's Mark Sims. And ever since, I've really enjoyed getting to know you, man. I feel like you're always helping me out with advice, but glad you're here.
Happy to be here, Jim. I was excited to be on this as well.
Yeah, and so Mark, he's been someone I really have enjoyed getting to know through you. I basically reached out to him. I was like, can I just come to your office and get advice from you? And he was kind enough to buy me lunch, take me out to his office and hang out. And so this has been a long time coming. And Mark, I feel I need to up my podcast game. The other week, you're like, yeah, let's do the podcast in person. I'll come to you. And I was working at the Techstars office and I was walking around. I was like, do we have a podcast studio? Do we have equipment? I've literally never done it in person with somebody. So I was like, sorry, we have to do this remote. So next time I'll have the studio to pull this off.
Well, you have the interview skills down. I just presumed that you would have the equipment in the space. But it sounds like that's on the way.
Right. It's all smoke and mirrors. So yeah. So we were talking beforehand. There's no linear path to the questions I wanted to ask. And one thing that I'm super interested in, we just did this kind of small acquisition of buying a company that I'm super excited about. It took forever to do. I made a bazillion mistakes along the way. And it's this idea of acquisition entrepreneurship, right? Don't start something, buy something. And this is something that you have done. This is something that you have pulled off. I would love to just get your thoughts on, at what point did you decide to make that move from hey, I've got this business going well, but when should I start looking into other ventures and your thought process and going down that path?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think it really, and by the way, I saw that on LinkedIn and I'm excited for you. It looks like to be an exciting company and product. I think really, if we think about just acquisition, why we look to acquire anything, it's really about growth. And I believe, in my experience, growth requires pushing our capacity, whether we choose to build it or buy it. And I've found I've bought and acquired businesses that are in my lane, that are in my facility service and product distribution space. And then thanks to Entrepreneurs Organization that we're both part of, Jim, I was able to meet some great peers that we had seen different skill sets and some degrees of subject matter expertise in one another, to think about how could we synergize that? How could we all invest in something while also making direct influence and impact together? So I think I've been pretty fortunate to be able to be a part of businesses that I wouldn't have otherwise been in because of being an EO, but then also just really making the choice anytime I can to push my capacity, to make myself uncomfortable. And I believe that not only is it a good net worth growth strategy, but a great personal growth strategy to think about acquiring, because it's also acquiring knowledge, and also you acquire relationships and people through acquisitions, or you bring on more people to be able to handle and maintain as well as scale. So I just think it's got, not that it doesn't come with a few challenges along the way, but there's a lot of good written on the growth strategy that surrounds acquisition from that standpoint.
Yeah. And I remember you talking about this as you were like kind of talking through what makes a good investment thesis. And one thing you said was this idea of like, I also don't want to buy a job. It's like I kind of already have a job. And so that really stuck with me. And so as you've like created your investment thesis, how do you think through like what's the right fit for you? And also you have some like superpowers as a founder and an unfair advantage, and how that like plays into like what makes a good investment or not.
Well, I think that as important as the product is, it's really, I've seen it time and again, and I've recognized where I've failed, that I underestimated the value of people. And those are the people, predominantly leadership within an organization, that are either there and existing. If it's a scenario where somebody, say a previous president, founder, stays on for a period of time, or you partner, or you found a great individual that you've had conversations with that you would bring into the organization, or that you recruit into the organization. So I think the people piece is critical, even as much as the product itself. And I think just also, I'm a big fan of businesses that have reoccurring revenues. So also taking a look at it when it is time to take a look beyond the people to the product, is that what type of business model is it, and what type of stress tests has it endured over time, or in a circumstance that was potentially difficult, like we all went through during the pandemic, is how would it either succeed or fail during disruptive times. So really looking at it from all lenses.
Yeah, it's so funny. It's like the more you get deeper into business, I feel like the more simple it is. It's like you want to have amazing people to do it well and do something that's just recurring revenue. Because I've been a part of those business models where it's acquisition based. Think like Casper mattress. You're like people buy a mattress every 7 years. That's a tough business to be in because you're always filling the funnel. But if you can close them once and they're paying every month or every year, that's magic, right? Um, and you mentioned you've done multiple investments. Like how many like companies have you either acquired or invested into? Like is that something you're actively trying to grow?
Absolutely. It's in the double digits. And in fact, this week I have a conversation with a service company and am looking to present an LOI. So excited about where that goes. It's a company that's been around for 30 years and has some great clients, and just looking to see if it's a great opportunity for that owner to turn their company over to somebody that they've come to trust and know that will take good care of their clients. And it's a great opportunity for us to carry on that legacy and our team to be involved in that. But I would also want to, you talked about customer acquisition. And I think that back to the people piece, just to share and digress a little bit, is that I enjoy sales. I enjoy that piece of it. I think as we've gotten to know each other, particularly from a B2B perspective. But when it comes to B2C, that's certainly not my expertise. But one of the businesses I'm involved in is a company called Syndicate.com. And that, again, has been successful all because of the people. But my past forum mate and partner is such a amazing customer acquisition strategist that it's fun that us partners are able to integrate areas that we add value, but he is so good. And then one of his former employees, who is the CEO of that business, is so creative and engaged. It's just really fun to see a business that I would never have imagined being involved in, but then being brought in for the few things I could help with, but just seeing magic take place because everybody is using their, as you referenced earlier, superpower to see that success unfold.
And that's sendacake.com, like send like a birthday cake.
Like send a cake. There's all kinds of, you should check out the website. It's, I take no credit for the creativity. I've just been along for the ride and supporting it, but it is it's one of the great companies, and they're always coming out with new products and innovations, and it's pretty special.
Wow, this is a really good site. They have 127,000 reviews on sending cakes. And any insights on those customer acquisition strategies they did, or is it just that they're always making noise and doing new launches?
I think that it's just the secret sauce of the CAC model on B2C that one of my partners there really understands well and has done a great job. And yeah, it's I'm amazed all the time at what he's able to do.
That's exciting. So you've done over double digits of buying or investing into companies. And is that all from Fikes as far as like that's funding that, or did you raise outside capital?
It's so myself and two past EO forum mates operate as a small private equity group. So we to date haven't had to raise any capital. We've been able to do that ourselves in those ventures. And then for anything I've done that is more Fikes related, I've done it myself. At times with some financing that I've received from a bank, or even just businesses I acquire that have owner financing scenarios that work good for the seller that maybe doesn't want to take all of the money up front or to parse it out for obvious reasons.
Yeah, that's amazing. I feel like I'm conservative to a fault with risk tolerance, with investments and money and debt, because I don't know why I'll like default to doomsdayer. It's like, oh, I need like all this cash under the mattress in case things go wrong. But like we're an agency, it's recurring revenue, it's pretty predictable. And even our interim CFOs, like you don't have to like always be prepared for the worst thing to go wrong, because the flip side is, what if we took some of that cash and were more aggressive and invested or use your line of credit or did these things? Did you ever struggle with that psychology of money as you look to these investments, because this is your hard-earned money that you're then putting into these other ventures? Like, how did you go from the one company to multiple as you're like managing that psychology of like risk and money?
I think I felt as though it was about a decade ago, as far as outside of the Fikes lane. It was about a decade ago. We were all sitting around at a dinner talking about, if we were to have a business together, what would that be? Why would we want to have it? And what impact could we all make in it? And I think it really, and at the time, it was a period where it was difficult. I couldn't find any targets in my industry because companies were either uh, small where you would buy a job, or they were so large that we'd have to go out and raise capital. There was no sort of middle of the road size organizations like mine. And I felt that maybe it was time to step outside to learn and grow and see what skills I had that could be applied, and a lot of skills I don't have that I could learn from other entrepreneurs in other businesses. So it really just came from that conversation. There was originally about 7 of us that were interested, and then it got distilled down to there being 3 left. And that's the 3 individuals in working knowledge ventures that I continue to invest in predominantly with today.
That's very cool. And one thing you've mentioned is like, okay, you've got these other founders, you all have your own superpowers. Clearly, one of yours that we talked about is sales and also people and team building. And you were mentioning one company you bought where you're helping the sales team going through their scripts, watching their calls, to help them get that down? This is a very self-serving question I'm about to ask you, by the way. As you like look at a sales team and they're doing their pitch, they're doing their talk, what are the common mistakes you see being made on those sales calls? Because we've ramped up our sales team, and I'm trying to give that feedback, and I'm always interested in how people manage their sales teams to like what are they doing wrong on those calls, and what should they change to do differently?
I love sales, and not for what's great about it, but what can actually be resurrected from common mistakes, was generally involve a displacement of priorities going in and not clearly understanding objectives, and then uh, mismanaged communication methods. So, what I mean by that is, if you think about a lot of sales calls, there tends to be a lot of talking, which involves telling and selling versus not near enough. I mean, we think about when we get pitched, not near enough pausing and peeling the onion back as we ask and understand. So, I mean, because we think about it, it's really the objective is to learn, to build and learn what the value is from that client, not verbally vomit of what we presume it might be, to build trust. And then from that, as there's reciprocated sharing, to find fit. So I think that's really what I see often, and it's really industry agnostic. Is there's so much telling and selling, not near enough asking and understanding, and there's way too much focus on the widget and not near enough emphasis on the why. And so, I mean, we all are emotional creatures. We all have emotional reasons for buying. And to maneuver those conversations in such a way where we're able to, I mean, one of the philosophies we have here at Fikes is the 3 A's. It's acknowledge, ask, and answer, and generally answer in the form of a credibility building statement. So, obviously we think about hi, my name is Mark Sims. I'm from here. And immediately going into the introduction, and this is what my company does, we haven't yet acknowledged that person that we're actually speaking to, which is the whole purpose of why we're there if we're selling a product or a service. So making sure that we acknowledge that individual, acknowledge the amount of time they have available for us, acknowledge what's important to them. So really acknowledge, and upon that, permission to ask those questions, to be curious and to better understand more about that. Be all in on what is important to them. And then, our answers, I mean, the question that all of us get in any industry is, how much does that cost, or what is your price? And not be afraid to say, I love talking about price. I guess, can I ask some more questions so I can get a better idea of what that might be for you based on what it is you want? And so, not just throwing out a number, because once we throw that number out, we may mistakenly throw out the wrong number. It may be too high or it may be too low. It's premature. We need to understand the problem and fall in love with the problem before we try to seek a solution that involves a said price valuation. So that's just at a high level. I love sales, and I love it because I believe no matter how long we all do it, and I still make mistakes at it, whether coaching or directly, is that there's lots of improvements that can come from it if we continually practice on the fundamentals.
Yeah, I love the 3 A's that you mentioned. I love just the framework of asking why, because I think of it as like my 4-year-old is in the why phase where she asks why 5 times, and then you're talking about the meaning of life. And so I I like that because as I've been like working with our new sales team, it's like I was giving them the script how to sell the features. I'm like, I'm doing it wrong. I need to give them the questions to ask instead of this. And I was really kicking myself because I was like, forget everything I just said. We're going down this path. And man, I'm with you. Sometimes like 2 years ago, I asked me, I'd be like, oh, I'm amazing at sales. I'm really good. And now I'm kind of humbled as I'm trying to train people. I'm like, I don't know anything. And I'm going back to those fundamentals. But that's super helpful. And it's one of those things where if you want to be like, I feel like a good founder, like knowing sales, knowing how to like do the transaction is everything. It's at the end of the day, as you rise up, that's what you have to be kind of good at.
I think that it even, to your point, Jim, I think that as a leader, if we think about presenting to our teams, there's a certain degree of communication understanding and how we ask questions of our teams, how we acknowledge them, and how we also answer in the form of vision and opportunity, and how we can all reach this optimal apex of company growth and personal growth in its apex of alignment. So I think it's beyond even sales. I think it's leadership. I think it's management and people development. I mean, we have individuals here that are great with working with our manufacturers, not just because we pay our bills fast, but because they're good at the 3 A's as it pertains to everything we do in communication, from negotiating the best overall value from our suppliers so that we can then in turn pass that on to our clients, whomever they might be in all industries.
Yeah, yeah. It's not just selling to customers; it's relationships and everything. Um, so it's so interesting. Like, I feel like you have such a growth mindset of learning and always like pushing yourself. I want to get into like the origin story of you being a founder, but I want to like put like a pause there. Talk to me about Mark before business, before like starting a company. Like, what were you doing? What was that path? Because I know you were like an athlete in college. Talk about Mark pre business world.
Are you talking, Jim, Mark, when I had a big mullet? Are we going that far back? It used to be coming out the back of my helmet. I mean, you could see it on game film, so it was there. So I looked very different. My wife always says that you would not have recognized Mark if you met him in college, because he was a much larger human and he didn't have a neck and he had a whole bunch of hair. So
You're still pretty large, so I mean, I think you're like all muscle, but yeah, like talk about like the parallels of like you're a college athlete, you played football, like what did you learn from that that you take to the business world? And before you do that, don't be humble. Give us your greatest football highlight. What's your like peak football moment?
I remember one game as a junior. I controlled the game with how much I was in the backfield, both disrupting plays of uh, whether it was the running back, quarterback. I was an outside linebacker, defensive end, so kind of like a Clay Matthews. I mean, you referenced that very similar position. So just wreaking havoc, to where. Uh, I mean, it's a team win, but it's always fun to look back on games to know how much of an impact you made, and that you were sort of, I mean, for receivers, it's being uncoverable. For running backs, it's being untackleable. For a defensive player, it's being unblockable. And that's what that felt like.
Yeah, it's like you're in the zone, right? And it's just like you're in that deep state where it's just everything's clicking. That's pretty cool. Um, but yeah, so what are those parallels that like you took from like being a linebacker in college and then going to the business world?
Well, I mean, I think that a lot of, I mean, you play the games how you practice. And I think that what sports in general does is equip you with a forced function that you have to be willing to subject yourself to discomfort, whether that is early morning wind sprints, whether that is weight room where you're maxing out. I mean, that's what you call it. I mean, you're always seeking to max out, whether it's a lower amount of reps uh, and or if you're doing the highest amount of reps at a given weight. So you're maxing out. You're maxing out in terms of your cardio when you're running, for stamina. So I think that piece. I mean, you're also. I mean, as a college athlete, you're studying game film, and you still have your credits that you have to cover in order to be eligible. So you're traveling, and I think for a lot of college athletes, wherever they might be. I mean, for me, I was smaller town at Montana State, so you're kind of a big duck in a little pond. And but you look at a lot of famous athletes. So that wasn't me, but famous athletes that get a lot of fanfare. I mean, it's a lot of distractions. So you have to be really focused And I, we've all read that the most important aspect to success of any leader, business person, entrepreneur, etc., is grit. And I can't think of anything that equips us more. I've not had an experience in the military. I would presume it's very similar, but just having to subject oneself to discomfort again and again and again consistently, such that that becomes the state that you are familiar with, such that it doesn't phase you. And I am so grateful because I look at startup phase, at different growth pain phases. I look at the pandemic when here we were, these recession resistant business models as we all have, to then all of a sudden lose your revenue or most of your revenue overnight and have to pivot fast. I think that if we're all shell shocked, I'm a big believer that the fast eat the slow, the big don't eat the small. So I think just being ready to just, after you got your face pounded in the dirt, to just get right back up and get going again. So I think that's what athletics and business sort of have that beneficial parallel.
That's so interesting. I just interviewed Brian Smith from Leon, BC in New York, and he is a former kind of like Moneyball guy, but for professional football clubs in Europe. And they would see like, are they going to spend millions of dollars on an athlete? And he took that Moneyball methodology and put it to founders. And he found that the number one trait if a founder is going to be successful is around grit. And it's so interesting. Like you say that he said that literally 2 weeks ago. How do you train or teach grit or put people in those situations? I'm thinking not even only for my team or myself, but even like my kids. It's like I give them kind of a cush and pampered life. It's like, how do I get a little grit in them? Like, do I take my 4-year-old and just throw on like Third Ave and Bell and be like, figure it out? Like, how do you teach grit or create circumstances where people can go through that?
It's a good question. I think that from my experience, it's been through showing it by example in what it is that we can do as leaders. I mean, for instance, I always say, even though a hot tub's more comfortable, I'm much more comfortable in a cold tub based on my objective, which is to make myself uncomfortable. So I think it's whether it's physical challenges or whether it's mental challenges, doing something. You probably can't see it, but I've got this mark on my nose. I was in Baja area for Thanksgiving and I've surfed 2 times in my life. The waves were pretty big. And I wanted to show my son that I'm going to do things not just of what I'm familiar with, but things that I'm not familiar with and uncomfortable with. And so it was really gratifying for me to see him follow me out there and stick with it, even though we were getting pounded. And I did get up and got some good waves, but I also, had a surfboard that gave me a good uppercut that I had to show for. But I'm so glad I do those things, and I think that standing up and presenting or being willing to learn something that you don't know, and I think just it reminds me, I was in on a leadership meeting even earlier this week, and there was a conversation of somebody saying that they really had a stressful week leading into Thanksgiving because they were taking time off and they had all these responsibilities and checklists and deadlines. And there was one member of the team that sort of empathized and really almost wanted to know how they could make that different next time, which I appreciate that intent. My perspective was different, and I instead said, sounds like it was a week that really stressed you out. I guess when we think about that, where did it make you better? When you're confronted with that situation the next time, how will you respond? And what did you learn last week that you can apply? And really, this individual, who's a great team member, who's been with us a few years, said, you spoke a year ago about how stress ends up equaling success if it's in the right mindset and framework. And I see exactly what you mean. It took that situation last week from really to resonate. So I think it's all those things.
Man, those are really good examples. I'm even thinking through like when you go through those stressful times, if you do it the right way, you come out so much stronger. Like during the pandemic, we lost a lot of our revenue. We had to get real good at closing leads quick, and it was horrible and stressful, but we like somehow pulled it off and we were able to take that. Even recently, like we got a little too fat and we weren't tight on how we ran the business, and it really came to bite us in the last 6 months. It was all about efficiency, and those were painful lessons, but we've come out of it lean. And you're making me see the silver lining on it, as opposed to just being like, man, what is this ride going to throw at me next? But it's so true. If you can just be resilient and last, man, you can do something really cool.
And a lot of confidence comes from embracing discipline and embracing the suck at times.
I think that's going to be the title of the episode, Embracing the Suck. That's pretty good. So we're like 30 minutes in, and I haven't even had you introduce yourself or say what Pikes is, which I'm pretty proud of myself. That's like maybe a record. It's maybe a horrible interview etiquette, but I think let's talk about the origin story of Pikes and how it came to be, and like how this all got started.
Well, I used to sell in different parts of the country in facility services, and some events occurred for sake of brevity, such that I moved back to Washington State and really was at a point in my life where I didn't really trust. I think about all the people on my team now in different states and regions and parts of the world that I trust and rely upon. Some of I don't even get to talk to much, and how wonderful that is. But in the early days, it was really a perspective based on what occurred, that if it is to be, it's up to me. So I came back. Fortunately, I'd been very frugal with savings, and I don't believe I had a real investable business anyway. And so I got a 10 by 10 storage unit in Tacoma, Washington. I bought some products that I put on pallets, and I bought a van, and it started with me. And I just went around and cold call prospected businesses, got them set up on reoccurring services with a simple suite of products, and just went one after the other. And then, of course, hired more people, bought more vans, bought more product. We're not in the storage unit anymore. We have multiple distribution centers in different parts of the West Coast. We're headquartered here outside of Seattle in Federal Way, but it was very humble beginnings. And I can still remember in this very humble, inexpensive storage unit complex, there was a metal scrapper that had a business down the way. And for some reason, he felt that it was okay to drive by me and to scoff at my business and say, "So, are you running a service business out of here?" And laughed at me. And I remember being, sitting there, going from a point in my life once upon a time prior to that of being able to, be in a stadium where you stand up after making a play and being somebody that people knew, to being there all by myself. I didn't even have I had a used desk, and I sat on a case of commercial paper towels for probably the first couple months, because I told myself I was going to get a certain amount of revenue before I'd buy anything and move out of there. And so in the early days, I had a rule called 5 after 5, which is 5 sales calls after 5 o'clock. And fortunately, it worked.
That's amazing. And so what was the like service you launched on the back of? Because you do quite a few today. And were you doing everything? You're like,
No, we were only doing at that time, and I shouldn't say only because it's something we've done for a long time. We were only doing sanitation, commercial sanitation, and we were doing odor control. So that would be predominantly restrooms, some common areas, and odor control. That was really the service suite, and a few products like paper towels, toilet tissue, maybe some soap. So fast forward, now we have about 3,500 products in stock at all times in any of our given. We have multiple millions of dollars of inventory. We service thousands of clients, and we have access to more products than that. And we have 10 different facility services that we don't subcontract, that we do directly. So everything from pest control, pressure washing, kitchen deep clean. I mean, I could go on, but just a host of different types of services that we've integrated in, because we really look at the relationships and the trust we build, and the more we can do for our clients, the more valuable we are to each other. And so, yeah, it's been fun.
Yeah. Can you speak at all to, and you don't have to answer this, but like the size of the company, any ballpark, so people understand the like scale you're working with?
Yeah, so we have about 5,000 customers out of four different distribution uh, warehouses looking to acquire another one. So we're a quantum size company. Like EO talks about quantum size companies as 15 million or more. We're well above the quantum size.
That's amazing, man. So I think you chose the right business model, and I think I chose the wrong one because I think your tagline is proudly obsessed with the dirty details. And there's this like movement of boring, non sexy businesses on the surface. But if you look at them from a P&L, it's magic where it's like, high recurring revenue, low churn, like scalable in the sense you can train people to do things. Like how much of that was intentional in the early days, and how much was of it was, wait, the thing I chose is amazing, and I'm gonna like dig my heels into, or I'm gonna go even more into this.
I think that it wasn't intentional as far as the industry itself. I think it came upon a challenge of me hearing that somebody in this industry was having a hard time finding traveling salespeople that would go to certain markets for said periods of time. Let's call it 3 or 4 months at a given time, stay in a crappy hotel and sell a certain amount of revenue and then have to move on to the next place, and how hard that was. And looking back on it now, when I talk about earlier in this not wanting to buy a job, that is not a job that I would want today. But thinking back about it then, having a little bit of a chip on my shoulder as a young professional, I wanted to do what was hard. And so I did that, ended up really enjoying the industry because you meet so many different types of businesses and different personalities and in different regions of the country. And so it was sort of fascinating to me that all businesses needed to, I mean, our three value propositions are enhance image, save time, and reduce cost. It doesn't matter what type of business you are. Our best clients are busy clients because they have a lot of needs, but to be able to do any of those three things at any given time for them. And so that's what really hooked me, is the why, not necessarily the widget. And then we over time got very proudly obsessed with those details, those dirty details, as it pertained to how we were able to accomplish that.
Oh man, that's amazing. And so there's a, this, it's not like you created some new technology or innovation, you have some huge moat around. There's other people in this space, but you went from a storage unit to a massive company. That is not easy. What were the inflection points in growth where like, wow, I've fired myself from sales. I'm like a president. Okay, I fired myself from that. Like, what were those milestones where you're able to go to that next level, and how did you have to like either change or adapt to grow with the company?
So I think some of it was forced. We got to a point where it wasn't sustainable for me to do as many things as I was doing. I would say probably about 5 years in, we had gotten to a size where there was, now a physical warehouse location. There were people. We were somewhat spread out. We had a number of products, and I was still leading most things. And coming from a place of distrust, I had to really face my fears, really take a look at myself and the ego surrounding that. And that was actually one of the reasons that I joined EO, is because I felt very alone. And to be able to talk to other peer leader owner founders about how they had gotten through it, because I knew how to sell, I knew how to work hard, I knew how to be committed, but I didn't necessarily know how to effectively delegate and empower people. Even though if I could have waved a magic wand, that's exactly what I wanted to do, I just didn't know exactly how to. And so EO, I always say, Entrepreneurs Organization is the best check I write every year, because I could never repay it based on the experience sharing, the peer leadership group, and everything it's given to me over the years.
Yeah, and for people that don't know, Entrepreneurship Organization's a group where if you're a founder doing over 7 figures, you meet once a month and with 8 other founders, and you speak in a format of experience share rather than giving advice. And it's all about vulnerability and being honest, and it's energizing, it's inspiring, and it really makes you think differently. And I wish I could have or would have joined it earlier. Like what
Same here. Even though I've been in 15 years, I wish that I would have joined it 5 years prior to that. I think those of us that love EO have the same sentiment, regardless of whether our stage or age.
Yeah. What like for people out there that are like going through it alone, like what are some of the benefits or reasons for having that peer group or that community? Because I think it's something that a lot of people don't think to invest in, but it's probably one of the biggest levers you can do for multiple reasons.
Absolutely. I always made a goal that for not very long do I want to be the smartest person in the room. And I mean, I'm an ex football player, so I'm a little bit of a blunt instrument anyway. But I know that some out there, like yourself, Jim, and others, are very, very smart people. But I would assert that we all should seek to not be the smartest person in the room, to be amidst those peers and those individuals that are challenging themselves, that are high caliber, that challenge us just by being in their presence, by the questions they ask, by the examples they show. And it's the only way to become an all-star is to be around and play on an all-star team.
That's so true because it raises your game. And for me, I love people that think differently and approach problems from a different angle. That's what I get really kind of inspired by. Very cool. Well, the last question I like to ask everybody, which is, what is the nicest thing anyone's done for you in your professional career?
Well, I've been fortunate to have a lot of nice things done for me. One of which was my very first employee, who was going to work for a year in the year or two in the twilight of his career, after the company he had worked for was acquired and he was a manager. His name is Chuck McElrath, and he ended up working for 17 and retired at 81. And we have an award named after him. That's an esteemed annual award that we provide to all of the individuals that live the core values and that have an amazing year. And it's a very, very big prize. But I want to take a chance to reference something that just happened to me a few weeks ago on my birthday. And my vice president, Elizabeth Hetty, who's worked here at Fikes for 13 years, put together a video compilation of some of the most important, beloved people in my life on my birthday. And they were very sneaky about it. And they said I was going to look at another video, and then some of them were here. And it was everything from childhood friends, Chuck, as I referenced, longtime manufacturer vendors, my wife, my two boys, EO, forum mates, team members, and it brought me to tears. And I can't think of any material gift that I would want. I'm not very material anyway, that would have made me happier than watching that video compilation. So it was almost 10 minutes. And in fact, I watched it on just before we went down to Mexico for Thanksgiving, and it brought tears to my eyes again. It was pretty special.
That's so cool. And to pull together all those people from different phases of your life, that's super sneaky and impressive. Yeah, so Mark, if people want to connect with you or learn more about what you're doing with Fikes or with your private equity fund, where should we direct them?
Probably the easiest way, Jim, is just look on LinkedIn, Mark Sims Fikes, and I will pop up. So that's the easiest place to find me.
Nice. And then the wkventures.com. And one double bonus question. If you were starting all over today in like a dirty, non-sexy business, what would you do? Would you just redo what you're doing? Or is there a category where like, man, if I was 22, I would jump all over it?
Great question. There are so many great dirty businesses. I don't know if I could honestly choose just one. I think that is honestly a part of my acquisition strategy is I am pulling lists of different verticals to look at, because I think that I don't know what I don't know. And I want to get inside of some of the financial successes or failures of some of those other dirty models to see which one I may want to acquire or somehow be involved in the future the most. That's a vague, long-winded answer, but maybe you'll have me on in the next year or two and I can share what I learned and perhaps what I did.
You know what? That could be fun. We're gonna do a future episode. You do that, and then I want to pitch you like 20 half-baked, dirty business ideas, and you can be like, bad, bad, bad. Okay, that's interesting. That could be a really fun one.
That would be fun. Sign me up.
Awesome. Well, cool. Well, Mark, thank you so much for the time, man. I appreciate it.
I loved it, Jim. Thank you, and look forward to seeing you soon.